One thing we haven't mentioned is technology. They're wired so that we will know if somebody's trying to break through, and you may want to discuss that a little bit, General.
Sir, there could be some merit in not discussing that.
Okay? I like that. That was a great answer.
Maybe you should try it on your calls, Mr. President. When it comes to Donald Trump's promise of a wall, he simply can't stop talking. Washington Post Phil Rucker was there with the president on the border and described it like this, quote, "The scene played out like a segment on the QVC shopping channel. In making this one-of-a-kind product, the host proclaimed no expense was spared. It was crafted from the finest natural steel and the heaviest poured concrete. This was the Rolls-Royce version, so strong, so imposing that no human being could scale it. Not even a champion mountain climber. 20 had tried and failed, he claimed. It's one thing to read about Trump's visit to California, but another thing entirely to hear it for yourself."
So you have the rebar, you have the outer crust, and you have the inside is concrete, and it's hardened concrete, very powerful concrete. And again, the concrete's poured after it's up. They pour it through funnels, and a lot of technological advances have been made with concrete. So if you think you're going to cut it with a blowtorch, that doesn't work because you hit concrete. I said, fellas, how about doing a less expensive version? They said, well, this is the version that works. That's the Rolls-Royce version. To protect you on top, how that stops, it's a anti-climb device if you look at the steel on top. We actually built prototypes, and we have, I guess you could say, world-class mountain climbers. This wall can't be climbed. This is very, very hard. We got climbers. We had 20 mountain climbers. That's all they do. They love to climb mountains. They can have it. Me, I don't want to climb mountains. Plus, it's designed to absorb heat. So it's extremely hot. You can fry an egg on that wall. So if they're going to climb it, they're going to have to bring hoses and water, and we don't know where they're going to hook it up because there's not a lot of water out here. Nobody's going over the wall, but going over it is impossible. Is virtually impossible. I guess maybe one of the greatest pole vaulters in history can get over the low one, but it's going to be very painful when they land, right?
Joining our conversation, Mara Gay, a member of the New York Times editorial board. She's here on set, plus the Rev Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation on MSNBC, president of the National Action Network, and Phil Rucker, the aforementioned Phil Rucker, is back from his trip with the president, where he got to experience that. Phil Rucker, maybe there's a job for him somewhere in the government where he's in charge of concrete and rebar.
Well, Nicole, this was like Trump's baby, the wall, and he was so proud of it, taking the press corps down that dusty road to see the construction site, and he showed it off like he were pitching sort of a new condo building or some of these skills he had as a real estate developer and promoter. And I have to tell you, he wanted more than anything, I think, for the journalists with him to be impressed, because when he got back on Air Force One for the flight home, he came back to us. We were all in the middle of eating our dinner, and he just wanted to know what we thought of the wall and kept asking, did you like it? Did you like it? What'd you think? Was it serious? So he's very proud of this achievement, obviously.
But is it true? I think I saw in your story, and let me just say, you and your colleagues are on a tear. Unbelievable reporting coming out of that building. I don't know what y'all are eating for breakfast.
Thank you.
What did I read in your piece that he had to acknowledge at some point that it was more of a remodel than actual construction of a wall?
Well, that's right. It's not new. I mean, it's just not. It's places where there was existing border barriers that have been replaced, and of course it's this enormous steel structure, 30 feet high, and it clearly does not cover the entire border, obviously, and in fact there were gaps in the very area in San Diego that we were visiting. But he proclaimed that he hopes that there will be 400 miles of it built by the end of next year, which coincidentally enough is the election.
Rev, this is Trumpian in every way, as Phil Rucker describes, but also in the fact that one of the boast points is sort of the cruelty of the wall, that it's too hot to the touch.
He clearly wanted to make an emphasis on how cruel it could be. But what he's also playing to here is not only trying to impress the media, he's trying to deal with potential voters next year that he, in fact, has this infallible wall. What he's not talking about is what happened to the fact that he promised Mexico was going to pay for it. So he's selling us some real estate, which has been his life's work, though he doesn't do it that well. But he's not telling us, but you are going to pay the tab, not the people that I promised you were coming in with the investment, which makes it all a con job in many ways, because he's showing us a product that he told us somebody else was giving us as a gift, and in fact, he's got his hand in our pocket.
Mara, I don't want to go there, but Donald Trump, I think, makes us all go there. He's obsessed with the size of things. He couldn't say in more different ways. It's so tall, you couldn't climb it with the pole vaulter. It's so big, you couldn't get over it with the mountain climber. It's so, I mean, it's a pathology, and you guys can put on earmuffs, but I'm sorry. Any man talking about the size of anything usually has deep concerns about said size.
Oh, I would say so. It's definitely my wall is bigger than your wall
It's
approach.
pathetic.
It
it's
is
like,
pathetic.
It's like he's there to brag, and even in bragging, he's pathetic.
No, it's embarrassing. But I would say that, we have, at the editorial board, actually invited him to come to New York and rebuild our infrastructure from the subway to, actually just last weekend, we suggested that we would name the Gateway Tunnel project, which is this tunnel that's falling apart between New York and New Jersey, the Donald Trump Gateway Tunnel, if he would come and actually invest in it. And
Make it bigger than any tunnel.
Truly, no, I mean, but there is something dark here. It's, we're actually building essentially a monument to hatred for his election, rather than investing in the country and in infrastructure that we need. And that just is depressing. I was at the Hoover Dam this summer, and it's, that was actually an amazing marvel. Of modern engineering, and here we are talking about the size of his wall. I'd rather he go to therapy.
Me too.
That is therapy for him. That was the happiest I've seen him in months. If I'm the White House Chief of Staff, I'm going to send him down to the wall once a week. Right. He was in such a good mood. He was loving it. And
he went back and talked to the press. I mean, look, that's a good point. But I guess, why does the whole country have to be part of that therapy?
Because he's our president?
Well, for a very simple reason. Look, it's easier to defend a wall than kids in cages. And the irony of what the president is doing on the wall is that he actually has succeeded in cutting back some of that surge in migrants over the border through a series of punitive and harsh policies and asylum denials. The wall is not the reason it's working for him.
Right.
But he wants to give credit to the physical manifestation of his policies and not defend the harsher policies that are less popular.
I do wonder, and to avoid the Freudian elements of how big the wall is.
We're done.
Okay, thank you. I'm just a little uncomfortable with that. His whole political premise, the election campaign he's set to run, is on almost assuredly.
Just put up, while you're talking, the head-to-head poll numbers, because I think if you're going to politics, this is germane to that. So these are the head-to-heads as Fox News has them, which may explain if there's a weekly trip to the wall coming. It may be because in a new Fox News poll, Biden's at 52, Trump 38, Bernie Sanders at 48, Trump at 40, Warren at 46, Trump at 40, and Senator Harris at 42 and Trump at 40. Go ahead.
So his MO is to do immigrant fear, right? He did it in 2016, he did it in 2018, caravans, warning of that type of stuff. It's going to be interesting to me to see how he balances what he wants to say is the completion or the near completion of this wall, which is supposed to be a deterrent, with also playing that card, the immigrant fear card, because on one hand, you're supposed to say, well, my policies worked. On the other hand, it's an admission that they haven't. And so I'm curious how this plays out in the months ahead, especially if he stays at 40%, because that means that he's going to have to really drive down a Democrat's numbers. And doing that is, to do that, he's going to play the same cards he's used in the past.
Phil Rucker, we also play at the top of the segment the sound of him spilling secrets about the technology behind the wall. It's amazing. Any point you make about Donald Trump usually confirms it or affirms it in some regard himself.
Yeah, that was a pretty incredible moment during that entire presentation at the wall yesterday, when he actually volunteered that the bollards, the sort of steel slats in the wall, are wired with advanced technology in order to detect when people might be attempting to breach the wall. He invited the Army Corps of Engineers general to explain in detail how that technology worked. Obviously, the general said that would not be a wise thing to do publicly, and the president moved on. But clearly there's not that filter there that you would normally have with the commander-in-chief.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.